Armin Maiwes lived in the city of Rottenburg, Germany. This city appears beautiful and seems safe and prosperous when viewed in photographs. Unfortunately, the first time I learned about this city was because of the shocking case involving Armin. It turns out that I am not the only one who knows about it. In 2001, the case drew worldwide attention due to his astonishing actions. Many people came to know this city because of that incident. Returning to the topic, Armin grew up with his father and mother. Their family seemed normal, like most families in Germany. On the surface, there was nothing remarkable about them, but in reality, they faced serious issues. Armin's mental and psychological well-being was affected by growing up in an atmosphere filled with pressure and fear of his mother. His mother was described as an extremely possessive woman with a negative mindset and tendencies towards paranoia. His parents often argued in front of young Armin, and eventually, his father left after being driven out by his mother. At that time, Armin was only 8 years old, so he did not fully understand the issues between his parents. Afterward, Armin lived alone with his mother. His paranoid, negative, and possessive mother vented all her emotions onto him. He was raised in a very unpleasant environment. He could never do what he liked, such as playing with his friends, as that was just a dream for him. At home, he was constantly scolded by his mother, and sometimes even hit for the smallest mistakes. As a result, Armin grew up in fear and felt very lonely. He never experienced a hug that made him feel safe, no one listened to his troubles, and he never heard any comforting words. Due to his stressful childhood, Armin created an imaginary friend named Frank and wrote stories about their adventures in the woods, even though he never actually went outside. His greatest desire was to have complete control over his life, but he never experienced that because everything was dictated by his strict mother. As he entered his teenage years, Armin began to develop an interest in reading novels, and among all the stories he read, he was particularly fascinated by tales of cannibalism. His curiosity about humans eating other humans made him wonder what it tasted like. This curiosity had been growing since his childhood. The desire for control and his fascination with human flesh merged, leading him to experiment by tasting his own blood during his teenage years. Although he found the taste strange, he actually liked it, and his curiosity only intensified. Once Armin became an adult, and his mother was no longer fully in control of his life, the cannibalistic desires he had suppressed began to surface. In 1999, his mother passed away from a heart attack, and since then, Armin had been living alone. This marked the beginning of his ability to have complete control over his life, including the fulfillment of his curiosity about human flesh. Armin often spoke about this fantasy, which was not just a fantasy, but had also become his obsession. His fantasies were not only about the taste of human flesh, but also related to the desires he felt. Here, he had developed a condition that made him obsessed with it. After his mother passed away, the desire to fulfill his fantasy grew stronger, and eventually, he began planning how to satisfy his curiosity. However, Armin realized that taking someone's life was against the law, so he started thinking of ways to channel his sexual urges, the desire to consume human body parts, without breaking the law. Eventually, he came up with the idea of creating a website and forum called The Cannibal Cafe, specifically designed for people with cannibalistic interests like his. On this site, Armin did not use his real name. Instead, he adopted the alias Frankie. This name reminded him of his imaginary friend from childhood who continued to exist in his fantasies into adulthood. On the site, Armin openly announced that he was looking for men aged 18 to 25 with normal bodies, who would be willing to be sacrificed and have their flesh eaten. His advertisement was very explicit, including his home address, hoping someone would come and fulfill his desires. Initially, many people viewed this site as a creepy joke, but no one realized that it was not merely humor. A few months later, an engineer from Berlin named Brandes Jürgen Armando contacted Armin, offering himself to be the victim. Brandes was willing and serious about it. He even visited Armin's home in Rottenburg, Germany. Upon arrival, Armin drugged Brandes so he would be unconscious. After Brandes was incapacitated, He was moved to a special room that had been prepared. The first body part that Armin cut was the one that had become the object of his desire, while Brandes was still alive. Strangely, Brandes himself, as the victim, shared the same interests as Armin. He even attempted to eat a portion of his own severed body part. However, unable to endure the pain, Brandes ultimately died from excessive blood loss. This entire process, which lasted 4 hours, was recorded by Armin, and the video was published on the site and forum as proof that it was not a joke. According to Armin, he did not feel he was breaking the law because this act was done with Brandes's consent. However, despite the video being uploaded, internet users at that time were still very few compared to now. Therefore, not many people noticed or reported the video. For 10 months following the incident, Armin gradually consumed Brandes's flesh, cutting it up and storing it in the freezer. Finally, in December 2001, Armin was arrested. What puzzled people was the fact that Brandes was willing to surrender his life and body to be eaten by someone he didn't even know. According to an article I read, Brandes previously had a girlfriend named Bettina L. They lived a normal life until Brandes revealed that he was interested in men. This revelation disrupted Brandes's life, leading him to attempt suicide several times due to loneliness and the inability to find acceptance for his sexual orientation. When Brandes saw Armin's site, he was intrigued because he felt it was the best way to end his life. Armin also promised to accompany Brandes until the end of his life, provided that Brandes was willing to have his body eaten. Brandes agreed, believing it was the best option to conclude his life. So if he were to die alone, it would be just that, death alone, right? But if he followed Armin's rules, it would be different. He would die in the company of Armin, especially since Armin was a man, and Brandes was also a man who was attracted to the same sex. Thus, it was a perfect combination for both of them. Ultimately, Brandes felt he benefited from this, and Armin was pleased to fulfill a long-suppressed desire. Armin also felt satisfied because he could finally satisfy his curiosity about something unusual to him. Therefore, it was a mutually beneficial relationship for two individuals with unique interests. That's why Brandes offered himself to Armin, even though they didn't know each other well. After Armin had done all of this, he recorded the entire act and uploaded the video to a website. In December 2001, Armin was arrested at his home, 10 months after the incident. A visitor to the site watched the video and was shocked, initially thinking it was just a joke. However, it turned out that what Armin had done was real. The visitor eventually reported the site to the German authorities. The police easily apprehended Armin at his home because he had listed his real address on the site. Armin believed his actions were not illegal because Brandes had given his written consent. However, despite this, the act still violated the law because it resulted in the loss of a life. When the police searched Armin's home, they found remnants of Brandes stored in the freezer. The officers and investigators who discovered this were extremely shocked, and some even felt nauseous. The case then spread throughout Germany and the world, as many people could not comprehend what Armin had done. The trial process for Armin took quite a long time. In one of the video recordings, Brandes appears to give his consent to Armin. Brandes calmly answered without pressure that he was ready to surrender himself. However, at that time, Germany did not have laws regulating cannibalism, which complicated the legal proceedings against Armin. Ultimately, in 2006, Armin was sentenced to life in prison for the charge of taking someone's life. Nevertheless, the act of cannibalism he committed could not be directly prosecuted due to the lack of applicable laws. During the trial, Armin admitted that he had harbored this strange fantasy since childhood. He expressed remorse for what he had done and advised others with similar thoughts to seek psychological help. According to Armin, there were about 800 people in Germany who shared his interests. He knew this because he had forums and a website dedicated to the subject, which made him aware of others with similar inclinations. Perhaps there were others who could have been his next targets, but fortunately, that did not happen as he was apprehended following the incident with Brandes. However, regarding the existence of other sites, I am unsure whether those sites still exist today. I only have limited information, but I hope that such sites no longer operate. Although now, with the advancement of the internet, Sites like that may have been filtered and monitored by systems, unless they can create them in more hidden places like the dark web, where monitoring might be more challenging, as it is not easily accessible to most people and can only be accessed by those who truly want to and know how. This is the case of Armin, which I find utterly incomprehensible, especially the aspect of Brandes consciously offering himself in such a situation. This incident is truly real, even though it feels hard to believe. However, regarding such behavior, it is not just Armin. There have been similar cases before in Japan, such as that of Issei Sagawa. I have previously discussed Issei Sagawa, who also exhibited similar behavior with strange motives. He consumed human flesh not out of hunger, but to satisfy his desires. This is a real example of how unusual fantasies can manifest in reality. Issei Sagawa had a tendency towards certain body parts, while Armin was interested in others. Although their victims may have been only one each, there are many other perpetrators out there with multiple victims, driven by various motives, such as revenge or other reasons. What is even more disturbing is when the motive is not hunger, but rather desire or unusual fantasies. What do you think about the Armin case? And what lessons can be learned? Write your answers in the comments. Subscribe, and see you next time for the next case at 9 a.m.